Hey, Cactus crew, thanks for tuning in. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Bill. Welcome to my channel. Every Monday, I delve into the Without a Crystal Ball archives and I dig up one of Katie Joy's older articles. This week is pretty much a follow up. We're still in the same year, still in 2017, where Katie writes about her son's misdiagnosed autism. And like I said in the last article, it's to remind yourself that V is on the spectrum, regardless of what Katie writes about, whether she writes that he does or he doesn't. Pretty much every child that is born premature is on the spectrum. Every child that has hydrocephalus is on the spectrum. Katie wants to take this label and dismiss that one like she does. It's not like her child is medically fragile. No, she goes to the extreme with that label. The proper term would be medically complex because he has multiple disorders. Because how bad does medically fragile child sound compared to my child is medically complex? Not quite enough oomph, not quite enough drama. The article that I'm going to read now is a confession of her neglect. Who the hell writes an article and says that your child was left undiagnosed, untreated, while you totally ignored all the visual signs? They were there. His head was growing. The pressure you could see in his eyes. Katie wrote that article when I was on the verge of being an alcoholic. The first 4 years of her son's life, she was drowning in her own sorrow. She writes about it, how she could not believe that she didn't get the life she dreamt of. She wanted that perfect child that she could have play dates and coffee dates with other mums and talk about how their child is growing at the same speed. No, her child was delayed in every single area. For someone who is so keen on getting that diagnosis to fit her child, rather than her child's symptoms fitting that diagnosis. This is what happens, Paulson. How come you did not know? How come you did not Google? Then you proceeded to take photos of your child with undiagnosed hydrocephalus, and you think you're a good mum? Wake up, Paulson. Wake up, because these articles are the brutal truth and they break my fucking heart. Give it a like, share it, comment below. I'm open for suggestions. Please do consider subscribing. Everything I say is my own opinion. All links in the description box below. Titled, When My Son's Life-Threatening Disease Was Misdiagnosed as Autism. December 26, 2017. And I'll link my last article in the description box below. That was where Katie found out that her son was on the spectrum. That was the autism diagnosis. That is when she became an autism mum and became part of that community. That was a new role. No longer was she writing about her chronically ill child. She was the autism mum. Her whole column on Pathios became about autism because she could get the most from that community. She found out probably in that community things that she could get if her child was autistic from the government. Hydrocephalus left for 4 years. I thought it was 3.5. I'm thinking now, if I'm putting the dates, we might even need to do a timeline. It's in my head, but maybe we should put it down on paper and then put it up on a video and look at the timeline, because we are in 2017. So V was 5. He's born in October 2012. She talks about how he has Chiari malformation, which is the spinal cord sticks out below the skull. That is also something that puts children on the spectrum. There are so many factors here. Why does Katie go from one diagnosis to the other and dismiss the previous diagnosis? Why? It's like when she jumps from religion to religion, she has to dismiss everything. Or when she goes from being a crunchy mum to being into science because science saved her son, she dismisses all of the natural remedies and all that as, what does she call it? Woo. Isn't it? Woo-hoo for Von. That was another thing, wasn't it? His heart surgery. He was diagnosed with hydrocephalus just before his heart surgery. He had his heart surgery in August 2018. So this is a year before his heart surgery. Imagine that. Imagine how sick he was. Over the course of my child's life, I have been an advocate for his health and development. My son is a blend of medically fragile with developmental delays. As he grew, his processing delays increased and his social skills deteriorated. In May of 2017, he was officially diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. When we received the diagnosis, I remember feeling a sense of relief with a tinge of doubt. While he fit the description of autism on paper and clinical presentation, there were aspects of his autism that just didn't fit the spectrum. Here we go, Dr. Katie Joy getting in the way. If you had this doubt, why didn't you bring it up before? Over the course of 4 years, I watched him lose skills in his development. Therapists chalked it up to autism regression. He had once been a good eater. He would try just about anything, touch all kinds of food, and would eat with enthusiasm. Then he started to vomit and choke and stopped wanting to try new foods. I wonder if that was because of what you were feeding him was not age appropriate. And once he choked on something, then he became fearful of all food because he didn't trust what you were feeding him. Babies need to trust their caregiver. They need to trust the hand that feeds them. But he still eats choking food. Crisps, M&Ms, chips. We were told his feeding issues were behavioural in nature. His oral skills deteriorated and he was unable to chew most foods. But he was also teething. You didn't factor that into the food that you were giving him. I have looked at all the photos. There are dates. You can't deny this, Paulson. You have shared the proof. When he started to lose weight, they labeled him failure to thrive. Katie, you wanted that diagnosis. You wanted him on a feeding tube because it was too hard. You were never consistent. You weren't caring. You didn't do the homework. You have no patience for him. You don't care. If you cared for your child, you would know looking at him that there was something very wrong. Does he have something that makes his head grow where it can build up with fluid? The pain, I mean, you fucking took him to the hairdresser. You took him to get his hair cut and he is screaming because the sensitivity that he would have been feeling on his scalp. Holy shit, the pressure build up and then you've got someone there chopping away. You think that's normal? You think it's normal to take a photo and share this? I've covered his face, but fucking hell, he's in so much pain. So much pain. When he started to lose weight, he was labeled failure to thrive and he was given a feeding tube, which the doctors were resisting. They didn't want to give him a feeding tube. They weren't giving up on him. They said that he would regress on everything that he's learnt so far, that his digestive system would be worse off by putting him on a feeding tube. But Katie, you insisted. I knew there was more to it than behaviour, but I didn't know what it was at the time. He had been verbal at age 1, but by 18 months, he had lost all oral skills.
You say rock and roll? Son! You say rock and roll?
Roll.
You say rock and roll? What else can you say? Hey baby, hey baby, hey.
Hey baby, hey baby, hey.
He was given a diagnosis of apraxia of speech. His fine and gross motor skills were poor and well behind his same age peers. But that is what happens when you're born premature. You've got to catch up, and if your mum doesn't put in the hard yakka, like the therapists were giving Katie homework to do, and then the next week he was going back and he had regressed because his mum had not done the homework. Neurologists told us he likely had global dyspraxia, a common comorbid diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder. You don't want any accountability with the way that your child has turned out. Do you think that everything can be blamed on a disorder? Step back, Paulson, take a look at those hands of yours. Did you ever use your hands to teach your child? No, you didn't. No, you didn't, because you don't know anything yourself. He became increasingly irritated by noise and sound. Now she knows that it's hydrocephalus, and now she knows what the symptoms are. She's writing it into the article like, oh my God, He fits. It fits everything. Well, why didn't you Google it? Why did you leave it for 4 fucking years? Why were you not paying attention? Because he was in daycare and then when he got home, you fed him and put him to bed? You rarely looked at your child because every time you looked at him, you felt fucking guilty. This is something that you can't lie your way out of. You've shared all the proof. I'm putting the puzzle pieces together, Katie. You have no idea the shit you've put your son through, the pain just because you can't feel emotion. The pictures you share, I'm a fucking true empath. You can put that label on yourself, but you cannot feel. Otherwise, you would not share all those pictures. He's in pain. You don't understand all those articles. You are drowning in your own sorrow. Guess who absorbed all that? Yes, your child, who was absorbing the world around him. Neglect. No fucking stimulation. The only stimulation he's getting is from a mobile phone shoved in his face because his parents don't have fucking patience. All these videos I've done are linked below. He became increasingly irritated by noise and sound, and he became resistant, almost violent, to being touched in any capacity. We were told that he had sensory processing disorder. Initially, this made sense, but no amount of therapy seemed to improve his seeking or avoiding behaviors. Oh, but you wrote so much about it. It's a whole section because you're an expert on sensory processing disorder, since that's what your son has. Let's not forget, you only got the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis in May, 7 months ago. And in that 7 months, you have become an expert, just like you did when he was put on the feeding tube. You became a tubey mum and you knew more than everyone. You didn't know what you were sharing. Guess what? I've got those videos too. And it does not paint a pretty picture, Paulson. In the midst of all these behaviors or developmental delays, his health was also starting to decline. He was born without a pituitary gland. Stop saying that. Stop distancing yourself. Go get therapy with no self-awareness so you can't be aware of anything that you've shared and how bad it makes you look. And you know what? I'm speaking up for V. I'm putting the pieces of this puzzle together for V. He was born without a pituitary gland and he had a complicated medical background. However, over the course of 4 years, his health slowly decreased. And there were times I honestly felt like I was watching him die. Jesus. We added doctors to our list of specialists. We grew from having a pediatrician to seeing more than 12 doctors across numerous specialities. We added neurology, neurosurgery, gastroenterology, cardiology, genetics, endocrinology, pulmonology, palliative care, complex care, ENT, and developmental pediatrics. Our days were spent driving from one clinic to the next, having labs done and doing various tests to diagnose various diseases. That's what happens when a child has something wrong with their brain. They have to go see multiple specialists. What you've listed there is really, they're all in the same department. So really, you could have just put it all under one specialty. But no, this is Katie. She's after dramatics. My house started to look more like a hospital than a home. We had IV poles, feeding pumps, feeding bags, feeding tube formula, syringes, medications, nebulizers, pulse oximeters, stethoscopes, and nurses became a staple in our home. I'll link the video down below. Katie gave us a tour of the medical closet. His social skills deteriorated. He, at one point, had been engaged with the world, eager and interested in people around him, and I watched him become a shadow of his former self. His mornings were spent laying on the floor, complaining of fatigue and pain, and uninterested in playing with toys. First time you've brought up his fatigue and his pain, which are obvious symptoms. But you didn't notice this, Katie, because you don't feel emotion. You don't feel for other people. You can't recognize pain in your child's face. If you could, Katie, 90% of the photos that you've shared of your child online, you would not have shared because you would be able to see the pain. You would be able to recognize that by sharing that, you would look like a shit mum, but you can't see that. You have no self-awareness. You have no empathy. You don't know what you're doing. We had been followed by a neurosurgeon for more than 2 years, monitoring a Chiari malformation type 1 and ventriculomegaly. Chiari malfunction is a problem in which a part of the brain, the cerebellum, at the back of the skull bulges through a normal opening in the skull where it joins the spinal canal. This puts pressure on part of the brain and spinal cord and can cause mild to severe symptoms. I have that. It makes my legs numb, makes my feet numb. Ventriculomegaly is a condition in which the ventricles appear larger than normal. This can occur when cerebral fluid becomes trapped in the spaces, causing them to grow larger. Ventricles develop early in pregnancy. We had been followed by a neurosurgeon for more than 2 years, monitoring a Chiari malformation type 1 and ventriculomegaly, which was thought to be benign in nature. After we met with other members of his medical team, we all agreed that we needed to revisit the neurosurgeon to discuss his symptoms. I love how you think you're so involved, like the doctors are having meetings with you. Which way do you want to go, Paulson? We can either go this way or that, but we need your professional opinion. As we sat down with his surgeon, did you bring your Google research? Could have done it 4 years ago, but you were probably too intoxicated. And that's why you didn't take him to therapy or anything. Really, it was just daycare, home, bed, daycare, home, bed. And that's it. You didn't have time to even look at him and realize that he had these symptoms: headaches, fatigue, nausea, gagging, retching, back pain, neuropathy in his hands and feet, pain in his legs and arms, dysautonomia, sensitive gag reflex. Well, that's gagging. Fucking hell. She just wants more on her list. Lost interest in eating, irritability, difficulty sleeping. His surgeon and I couldn't seem to agree on the root cause of his symptoms. Why the fuck are you getting involved? Why are you countering? Are you just coming back with things you're like, nah, it's not that. It has to be severe. More severe than that. I'm not leaving here unless his disability is permanent. After our initial visit, she sent us off to numerous doctors to go over symptoms. We needed to rule out all possibilities before she would consider brain surgery. When we completed her list of appointments, we met her back in our office. So now you have an office there as well. Okay, professional. And discussed our next steps. We agreed we needed to check for high pressure in his brain. Get out of it, Katie. Get out of it. You are not part of it. And when you are part of it, the neglect happens. So you want to be all up in the business now. It's too late. The damage has been done. We scheduled a surgery for that following Friday. A plan was made to measure pressure, check for symptoms, and we discussed the possibility of a shunt being placed in his ventricles. The day of surgery arrived, and we were nervous but hopeful. At no time during this process did I even consider that hydrocephalus could be the root cause for his developmental and social delays. It's not the only thing. He also is on the autism spectrum, Katie, but you've dismissed that because we're all eggs in one basket. No time to be collecting different diagnoses. No, that would make him medically complex. On the second day in the hospital, after an external ventricular drain was placed in his brain, aka his shunt, it was clear he was suffering from high pressure. It was clear to the doctors? Well, Katie, it hadn't been clear to you for the past 4 years. Nothing's clear to you. Nothing is clear when you have tunnel vision and you're also intoxicated. You are a danger. You will not even perceive danger because you are the danger. His team came into the room and we were given a pamphlet on hydrocephalus and discussed the shunt. It was then I Googled symptoms of hydrocephalus and stumbled upon the list of learning disabilities and social deficits of children with hydrocephalus. I remember reading through the list and my mouth dropped wide open. Children perseverate or repeat themselves over and over. Sometimes they exhibit echolalia. Children can be hyperverbal and have large vocabularies, talk non-stop and ramble on. Children can have poor eye contact. Children can have difficulty reading non-verbal cues, gestures, or understanding emotions. Motor skills in walking, talking, and eye-hand coordination are delayed. They are literal and have a very difficult time picking up tone and sarcasm. Katie, have you had your veins drained? They have an incredible memory with no context of understanding what they know. I could not believe what I was reading. My son was not autistic at all. Hydrocephalus was not only causing his health to decline slowly, but it had also impaired his brain so much that he had been diagnosed with autism by mistake. A massive wave of emotion that I've never felt before because I don't feel emotions or even know what a huge wave of emotion would feel like. A massive wave of emotion came over me and I tried to make sense of what I was reading. Everything I thought I had known about my child was not true. He wasn't dealing with neurodifferences. He was dealing with high pressure and brain injury. My entire life shattered at that moment. I thought I was an autism mum and I had worn that badge proudly. Now I was a parent of a child with hydrocephalus and high pressure. See how she adds this stuff? You don't need to add that because that's what hydrocephalus is. Build-up of cerebral fluid in the ventricles in the brain. That is the pressure. It causes the brain injury by pushing back parts of the brain. So you don't need to add all this, Katie. You want it to sound more extreme than it is. Why not accumulate all of his diagnoses and put them together rather than dismissing one and then exaggerating it even more for that drama? Now I was a parent of a child with hydrocephalus and high pressure and brain injury were causing my son to appear autistic. I lost a community I had grown to love and entered a world where I honestly knew nothing. We were doing all this therapy that never seemed to work. I was told to stick with it because he would eventually get it. In that moment, I realized why none of it worked. Well, you didn't do the work. No amount of therapy was going to fix his ability to learn. The only fix was surgery. I thought back to all the times I embraced there is no cure for autism. I thought back to all the times I was critical of mums talking about their kids coming off the spectrum. It hit me like a ton of bricks. He was misdiagnosed as autistic, was not on the spectrum, and came off the spectrum with a single surgery to his brain. My mind raced thinking of all the parents that might have gone through this same situation. We had been given a clinical diagnosis of symptoms, but my son had a medical reason causing those symptoms. After his surgery, the changes in his skills were profound and rapid. My son went from making no eye contact to sustained eye contact with every person. He started to ask questions about the world. He was able to have sustained and appropriate social interaction and conversations with people. His coordination and clumsiness seemed to disappear overnight. His imaginary skills exploded. He wanted to eat more food by mouth, but remained G-tube dependent. Why? Why? If he wanted to eat more food by mouth, but you kept him on the G-tube because that's the permanent disability. Not removing that, are you? When are you going to realize that his feeding has nothing to do with the hydrocephalus? Yes, it would have caused nausea. Yes, it would have caused gagging. The apraxia of speech, oral dysphagia, it's all that. Those are effects from being born premature, not up to level with average child. Always going to have that delay. How do I know this? Because I was born premature. I have gone through all of that. His memory and retention improved. He was engaged with others. He no longer complained of pain. Did he complain of pain before, Katie? Did you dismiss it? Why? He slept through the night. He played all the time versus laying on the floor exhausted. He was a different child. He had been living with undiagnosed hydrocephalus and had been living with high pressure for most of his life. Exactly. The symptoms were there. It's not an invisible illness, Katie. It had impacted every aspect of our lives and had stolen skills, health, and energy from him daily. You stole that. You're the caregiver. You gave no care. The high pressure had damaged his autonomic system and caused permanent nerve damage. That's you. That's your neglect. Do you know how bad this makes you look? My son had been misdiagnosed with autism. His medical symptoms were classified as developmental delays. The only reason we ended up with his diagnosis of hydrocephalus was that I refused to give in and watch him die. I refused to believe that his regression and lack of development was rooted in an unknown cause. I advocated for him fiercely, got into arguments with doctors, and at the end was told it was my fight that made them listen. You ignored the symptoms of hydrocephalus in your son for 4 years, Mrs. Paulson, so sit the fuck down. My child was never on the spectrum. My child was suffering from a debilitating disease that would require a lifetime of surgery and maintenance. But we had finally gotten to the root of his decline. For some children, medical reasons do cause clinical symptoms that appear to be autism. Oh, you're an expert now, are you? I never in a million years thought my child would be one of them. Here we are now, off the spectrum, a place we never really should have been to begin with. Had his disease been discovered sooner by his mum, what were you doing? Hey? Too hungover to drive. Too hungover to notice, too fucking narrow-minded to even believe that it could be anything. Look, V, we are so close to getting the autism diagnosis. Please do not ruin my chances now. If you've got something else, it's got to wait, okay? Once I'm an autism mum, the benefits that I can get are through the roof. I will link last week's article down below, which ties into this. Her behavior somehow caused this. His traumatic brain injury at 3 months old didn't just happen by itself. And so then from 3 months old to December 2017 when he's 5, so 4.5 years, his hydrocephalus was left. I thought it was 3.5. When you Google how long can you leave hydrocephalus for, it says 3.5 years max. Otherwise, the child will die. Katie said, it was like I was watching him die. Well, do something, Paulson. Do something. No, you would rather him not learn, not get any better, because then you can claim the benefits of having a permanently disabled child. What is coming to your mind as I've read this? I'm so mad at Katie for dismissing, for jumping from diagnosis to diagnosis and never keeping one if another one is more extreme. That's a label she wants, like a medal, like a badge. What the fuck? How many communities has she gone through, got what she wanted and moved on? We know it's many. Guys, please do give this video a like, hit subscribe, comment, share this, and I'll see you guys again next Monday when I dig into the archives of Without a Crystal Ball. Okay, guys, take care out there.